foremost, because it always picks up.
I believe it was Tip O'Neill who once said that all politics is local. That's because activism starts at home and politics starts at home and it spreads from there. And that is why we are so grateful to have a guest today who can talk about what is going to happen locally here that can actually spread to other countries, because they are looking at mayoral candidates all over the country right now. And for some odd reason, Ballotopia seems to feel that St. Pete is the place to look at. So let's look at that and other things on today's rotation. Okay, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Gary Sy. I'm the Political and Policy Director for Suncoast NORML and our Master of Public Health. And in the lower left-hand corner, coming to us from his anchor store in Ybor City, which has now spread to St. Pete, as in the great Chillum, we have talked about Carlos Jose Angel Armida.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And our Master of Business Administration. And coming to us above there, from above the Beltway, where he hits him below the Beltway, where he is somewhere within a 5-county radius of Washington, D.C., is our Executive Director and our Master of Public Administration, Christopher Cannon. And we, of course, are the Masters of Cannabis. And we are very grateful to have somebody here who has thrown her hat into the ring of what could be a very interesting race in St. Petersburg. Maria Scruggs. Maria, how are you doing today?
I'm well, guys. I'm well.
We're doing well, Maria.
I got to ask the same question of all candidates here. What made you decide to run for office?
Well, I can tell you it was a very natural progression for me. And while that was not initially on my radar, because I supported Mayor Welch in his bid for mayor, and certainly did not see a place where I would be running, at least while he was in office. And when I was approached on 2 occasions, the first time I was asked if I would consider running for mayor, I absolutely not. I was focused on retirement from Orange County Corrections, and that was just not on my radar. And when the question came the second time, I'm a Christian, I'm always like, why are these messages coming to me now? And the long story short, after a couple of focus groups I agreed to do, looking at what were the strengths that I brought to the mayor's race, it was a yes. And on August 1st, I found myself down at City Hall filing after about 2 months of prayer and 2 months of focus groups with local folks from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and here we are. I was the first one actually to file and was the only one in the race for some time. The mayor, as you know, may have filed maybe a week or so ago, and then the former fire chief has now filed.
And of course, out in the background somewhere is this tall guy with white hair. He used to be attorney general and governor and representative, and who's the patron saint of St. Petersburg, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, okay, Gary, you funny. No, but you bring up a good point, Gary. This is going to be an interesting race, especially with Maria in the race. Maria, you first came on my radar many years ago across social media because of your work with the NAACP. Yes. And our organization, NORML, has been a civil rights organization at its core. It's just that our constituency is a little bit more narrowed in that we support people who have been affected by cannabis prohibition and the civil rights of everyday Americans that get trampled on by an overwhelmingly over-policed system that was designed by the Nixon administration to essentially criminalize something that, for the vast majority of folks, and even in American history, has been utilized as a medicine, as an industrial product. And in the grand scheme of things, we just don't see the value in continuing bad policies from the past. And so, we want to see legalization happen in a responsible manner, in a manner that takes it out off the streets and puts it in a regulated fashion, so kids aren't getting access to it. And we hope that that's something that, as mayor, that we could count on you to support.
I'm gonna be very honest with you. That was not my initial yes.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to get there where I am very supportive, because the key word that you used was responsible. Coming from a background, a law enforcement background, my concern was the ability to be able to regulate it to the point where we did not find ourselves with individuals that were now, because it was legal, standing the chance of becoming addicted. But then what I had to do is take myself back to prohibition and remember how prohibition evolved and how alcohol evolved. And now the sale of alcohol is legal, it's regulated, and I can now support marijuana following a very similar path that prohibition took with alcohol in this country.
Sure.
And you have a very interesting path because of the fact you're coming from the point of the correction system, which is a work in progress. Let's put it that way for the state of Florida, and because of the fact that there is both a public sector and a private sector as forces within that thing, and too often they mix. And when the private sector pushes the public sector to go farther, to arrest more people, for less actual good cogent reasons and for more protectual reasons.
Mm-hmm. But I do believe that I'm seeing a slowing down of the arrest in Orange County, and I can only talk from where I sit. I am currently the jail administrator responsible for pretrial release supervision, pretrial diversion, drug testing, and I can definitely see the path where the current state attorney has really been reducing their convictions of and on marijuana charges, particularly with certain amounts. They have a very, very simple diversion program for small amounts. So I do see that do see the trend changing in Orange County, where you're going to eventually, I see the rest of the public sector get to a place where we really evaluate the public safety metric, which is what we have to look at when we look at the public safety metric, as to whether we are using the taxpayers' dollars in the best manner by continuing to enforce the arrest and conviction and even incarceration of individuals for marijuana and marijuana possessions.
Well, it's comforting to hear a justice system insider, someone who sees it every single day of how the justice system operates, that, things are getting better, that the work that we try to advocate for in Orange County, from, civil decriminalization, where you get a citation for certain amounts, to ensuring that judges and state attorneys are being elected that are not going to overly criminalize people. I mean, it's just been interesting to see how the various states across the South have taken different approaches. In certain states like Mississippi or Alabama, I mean, we're seeing people get 30 years in prison, and yet there are people who are making billions of dollars off the same product a couple states over.
There you go.
That is ludicrous in the grand scheme of things, because as taxpayers, we want to see, roads that work, schools that educate our kids, and healthcare policies that don't leave us in the poorhouse or declaring bankruptcy when we get sick. And to think that even the private prison industry has become something that we're seeing right now with the immigration issues. really, come down hard on states and taxpayers to keep their prisons full for profits, rather than what prison has always meant to be, a place where you rehabilitate people so they can re-enter into society, or at least if they're not capable of rehabilitation, identify that and put them in a place that's safe to keep the rest of us safe. And in the grand scheme of things, for years we've not seen cannabis users in a dangerous light. What we do see is the most dangerous thing about cannabis in America is getting caught, and that's something that we definitely have to do better at. Now, we do want to see cannabis revenue dollars that tend to be generated from taxes or fees to be used for good things that help, like drug rehab, like addiction counseling and such, like to ensuring that there's education out there so kids understand this is something that's for people 21 and up. It's for adult use, just the same way people are educated on alcohol. And we've seen teen use rates decline in legal states. We've seen it to where it's getting better. But then there's also bad actors in legal markets as well. One of the things that's been really controversial is how the hemp market has exploded. And you have people like Carlos, who's a responsible hemp store owner, who has locations in both St. Pete and Ybor City, who does things right, who ensures that his products have a certificate of authenticity. And then you have guys who run corner stores and gas stations who have no problem having unregulated products and sometimes unsafe products that are available to the public. And this has created a big controversy in the public policy sector, even to the point where we're seeing the federal government possibly decide they may want to do away with that entire industry altogether. And the whole reason it even exists, and Carlos will tell you this, all of us will say, is because we don't have legal access to what people really want. So there's all these roundabout ways of why it exists. And so when candidates come on our show, we try to take the time to both inquire about their policies and even educate sometimes, because as you said, we've been operating in a prohibition mindset for so long in this country, and we don't necessarily have the latest research or see how trends are working. We can only see what we observe ourselves. And I found it interesting, a Facebook post that you put up a few weeks back. You said, "What is in this weed? Because it is stinky." And I was taken aback, and then I laughed and I giggled. And the fact is that sometimes it can be pretty the terpenes can be pretty strong. One of the things that we found, and this is why Gary and I take a public policy slant, is that we're concerned about what they're putting into the legal product that they're selling. Because the legal industry sells to sick people, and we want to make sure that sick people aren't getting things sprayed on their medicine that can make them worse, or that is there for the sake of just trying to move a product rather than actually help heal people.
Well, that is definitely my concern. I worked undercover narcotics back in the day as a special agent with Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and I was a former beverage agent, and I just do not remember marijuana smelling like we're smelling. And I can't help and I have just the same concern about what we eat, our fruit. What the taste and the smell of what is coming out of the ground is very concerning to me. And one of the organizations that I have reached out to is because I did this even in my role as president of the NAACP, is I want to have a solid understanding on environmental justice and what organizations are doing to educate, inform, and mediate some of what we're growing, what we're using, what soil we're using, because something isn't right. I can tell you, it just blows my mind when I walk out the door and my neighbors smoke, and I'm thinking, are y'all all right? Because it is a very, very different type of smell than something that would be naturally grown.
I promise you, they're okay.
They're okay. He did. He told me that. He was
instead of asking if they're okay, you should just leave them like a bag of Funyuns and some soda. They'll love you forever.
Maria, I'm glad you brought up about soil, because there's two interesting points that I think all candidates and policy officials should be aware of. One is the scientific value of the cannabis plant when it's grown as hemp for hemp purposes rather than as a medical marijuana, because hemp actually cleans the soil, and it can help restore soil degradation, especially with the nutrients that get pulled out of the soil when you overgrow. And they've even utilized it to pull radiation out the soil and other heavy metals to clean the soil, which is great. Now, on the other hand, we have some major industries in Florida that have bought a lot of local governments outright. And I'm going to name them who they are. And if it's in a hit squad in my house, so be it. But Mosaic has poisoned much of the areas in Central Florida. And it's very concerning to a lot of folks as to, like you said, what's going on with our soil, what is going on with our water, what is going on with the fruit and vegetables that we grow, why is our citrus industry dying? And you can't always prove it, but you can see the correlation. And I think that's the major concern that folks have right now.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that sinkhole that occurred over in Polk County not too long ago from the gypsum stacks when they collapsed, and that was just an amazingly tremendously scary looking thing. To think of how much is going into our aquifer, and yet here we actually have a plant that remediates soil that can actually pull the citrus canker and the citrus greening out of the soil, so we can go back to replanting our citrus plants and not just give off our entire citrus crop to Brazil to run for us, which is basically what's happening right now.
And shout out to Florida Agriculture and Mechanical University, FAMU, for their research and work that they're currently doing on the plant in the state of Florida. It makes all the difference. It's interesting to see how the different universities approach it. FAMU is doing a lot of research the benefits of the plant, while University of Florida is advocating for prohibition. So you see how politics is playing a big role, even in our universities, and how we research and develop this for whose money, who's getting paid in the grand scheme of things. At the end result, is it the private prisons? Is it the industry? Is it other folks that are trying to get involved? And so I want to go to our resident IT geek, Katrina Pink. Kat, I always say you're our voice of the streets. You have a pulse to where everyday people are coming from. What's your question for Maria, who wants to be the next mayor of St. Pete? And I think your mic might be on mute, Kat. Let's just get you to unmute that at the hardware part. Sorry about that.
So, at least one of those mics should work.
She got it. She's got it. But why Kat's getting that fixed? Maria, you literally commute from St. Pete all the way to Orlando on a regular basis. Do you also see how the I-4 corridor is developing? You've seen, the roads definitely and those changes. Just what are your thoughts and vision as a big city mayor, in Central Florida for our joint growth as a state and as a region? How do you see things shaking out? What do you want to see done better?
Well, one of the things that I have started doing is trying to think outside of looking at planning for the city of St. Petersburg and looking and finding the need for us to do more regional planning. Because like you say, I'm going through 3 counties every day. I'm hitting Hillsborough, Polk, Osceola, and then Orange twice a day. And when you see the growth and mentioning the sinkhole that was on I-4 a couple of weeks ago that I got caught in and ended up having to stay over in Polk County, I think that the mayor of all of these major cities on that I-4 corridor have got to start thinking and planning more regionally, not only locally, but more regionally, as to how this growth is impacting our environment, not just on a local basis, but on a regional basis. I have been paying attention. There is a new mayor now in Lakeland. There will be a new mayor in Orange County at November. Prayerfully, I will be the new mayor in there'll be a new mayor in Tampa and a new mayor in St. Petersburg, and hopefully I will be that mayor. And one of the first things on my agenda is to reach out to those mayors and start talking about how do we formalize our relationship along the issue of planning. Um, because I just see a tremendous amount of growth and have seen a tremendous amount of growth over the last 19 years as I have crossed I-4, traveled I-4. And I am very concerned that us working in these silos as not serving in the best interest of our local economies and our local infrastructures.
Now, for those of you who are not familiar, St. Petersburg is the seat of Pinellas County, which is essentially a peninsula that sticks out into the ocean, kind of like a big old skin tag on the west side of the state. And it's a highly concentrated area. You've got like 60 square miles and about 300,000 people. And that creates water issues and all sorts of issues that are particular to St. Pete that those other cities wouldn't have. And I know that there's also been problems in regards to the water flow, and that hopefully has been corrected now in regards to the sewage is concerned.
Well, I'm not sure that that it's been corrected. I know that the city has invested a lot. And one of the conversations that you kind of have behind the scenes when you get find staff that are willing to talk is, has the issue really been resolved, or has this been about political posturing given that we're in an election cycle? And I can tell you one of the things that leads me to wonder if this issue has been fixed is the amount of unusual flooding that we're experiencing. And it's the type of flooding that we're not seeing with a major storm, but just with rain, just the normal rain. And so the question, I don't know that it's being fixed. I truly honestly don't know. I can only tell you what we see reported, what we're saying is in the process, but it's just, I look at one of the primary indicators here is flooding, and we're seeing flooding in areas that have never flooded before. And as I indicated earlier, it's not just about when there's a major storm, just when we have a normal rain that we're experiencing. So I think that it's going to be one of the key political issues for this mayoral cycle, is if the investment that the current administrator has put in infrastructure has really resolved the issues that we've been experiencing in St. Pete.
Well, before we circle back to Pink, I wanted to go to Carlos real quick, because Carlos actually has a shop there on Central Avenue in St. Petersburg. Carlos, you talked a lot about, since the hurricane and since you've opened, the downdraw of business and how it's affecting small businesses in the area. I mean, Maria's here running to be the mayor. What are your thoughts? What do you want to say to hopefully someone who wants to help revitalize that?
Right. I mean, I don't know if it's, it seems to be everywhere. It's not just a shop in St. Pete. It's Ybor City as well. It seems to be this entire area. I mean, I don't know. How is saying it seems like, okay, I got you here, Kano. You want me to ask a question? I'm going to be on the top thing here. So, Maria, it seems to, in my professional opinion, as somebody that owns a business in 2 counties in the state of Florida, it seems like the state of Florida is, excuse my language, but fucked. It seems like, honestly, our state government has been failing us. And I have you on here wanting to be part of municipal government. How is St. Pete going to overcome being in the state of Florida?
Well,
So badly.
You're in the spotlight again, Maria. There you go.
yeah. Well, I can tell you that survival is definitely one of the courses that is going to be one of the challenges for municipalities in the state of Florida, given one of the most profound impacts on the state on the city. And you talk about business now, is if in fact the uh, legislature passes the elimination of property taxes, one of the biggest challenges that is going to be facing municipal governments, local governments, is how do you make up for a potential loss of nearly $89 million? And that's one I certainly can't begin to tell you the impact, because that impact is not going, it definitely is going to impact the service levels of what local municipalities do, and the big question of how you then replace that loss, that significant loss of revenue. And one of the things that I'm looking to do with small businesses is to convene um a small business council, and I've already began to meet with small business owners, because I frequent downtown and I frequent Central. My stylist is right there on Central, so I'm on Central all the time, and I'm noticing the decrease in foot traffic. And with the exception of a couple of businesses, there are a couple that are doing well, but I don't honestly know what the issue is. But I know that a part of my campaign focus is to bring those businesses together and to talk to those businesses, because I'm not learning. I joined the chamber some years ago to try to gain a better understanding of what was happening with our small businesses. And this had nothing to do with me being mayor. It had more to do with me being a citizen in St. Petersburg that have a very specific focus on supporting small businesses, because I truly believe that in a city like St. Petersburg, our economic growth is going to depend solely on our ability to help build the capacity of small businesses. And I joined the chamber. I've had people go to the greenhouse, and I'm just not getting an understanding of what the issue is. You say you have other businesses in other counties and they're experiencing the same thing. This is also the
It
reason
seems
why.
to be a trend. I'm sorry to cut you off, Maria, but it seems to be a trend throughout the state to
Mhm.
focus on getting out of state developers to come in and buy up property. These developers raise rent on the locals. I see a huge divide. You know, maybe I'm getting too deep into it, but you know, I see a huge divide between the classes now. I don't see a middle class anymore. I see very, very poor people and very, very rich people. My business is actually on Central Ave. I appreciate you noting that there's a loss of business in the area. But I mean there's a lot of there's a huge divide for somebody whose business really is supposed to support middle class people. I'm you know, we're there for people that can't, you know, my business is a hemp store, so you know, we're there to support people that can't afford expensive medical marijuana.
Right.
You know, and a lot of those people are people that can't afford, you know, healthcare. You know what I mean?
I
So
can't say that one thing about St. Petersburg is it's very walkable. It's a lot more walkable than Tampa, although Ybor City is pretty walkable. But St. Pete is amazingly walkable, just going
well,
around the 2nd and 4th Street area and around Central Avenue where Carlos's store is.
Well, it's weird because it also seems like there's pressure from the state government for the city government to not really focus on anything that really matters. I mean, especially in St. Petersburg, I mean, I've had to call the cops more times for my store in St. Pete than and my other stores in Ybor City. Ybor City has the reputation for being filled with crime, not Central Ave in St. Petersburg. And I see the city government focusing more on, rainbow crosswalks, you know what I mean? And and it's like, I mean, and then I get pulled over, and I'm a business owner in the area, and the cops are ruthless in St. Petersburg, man. I'm not even gonna lie. I got pulled over for and the cop was like, yeah, your registration's out of date and your license is suspended, so I'm taking your license and I'm taking the plate off of your car. You got to park it right now. And good luck with whatever the fuck you were doing, buddy.
No warning, no nothing.
No warning, nothing like that. It's just like, you see that city lot over there, park the car right there. Pay for it, and yeah.
I mean, the problem is, you look at Carlos, and first thing you think of is hardened criminal.
Oh, no, I don't know about that.
Well, I think Carlos brings up a great point that I think Maria as mayor can take a role in. Is where do you see policing in St. Petersburg, Maria? I mean, especially with your work with NAACP, has it gotten better? There's still room for improvement. Are we there yet? If you had to give it a grade, especially with everything we saw from 2020 onwards, did all the protesting do any good? Have we seen reforms? Or how much more do we still got to go to get to responsible community policing?
Well, I think that one of the issues that we have to, I want to go back to where Carlos was talking about the affordability. Let's be real. St. Petersburg, like most cities in the state of Florida, is in an affordability crisis. We're in a situation where we're the have and the have-nots, clearly. And those issues that impact the middle class have been muted or downplayed, so that we don't even, in my campaign, we don't even use the term affordable housing, because the question becomes affordable for whom? And the days that we start considering a townhouse at $310,000 as affordable, when we look at what our minimum wages and where our average wages are in St. Petersburg, there's a total disconnect. We then go over to, let's switch on over to law enforcement. I do truly believe that we have a lot of room for improvement. I believe that our current chief is a wonderful person who really acquiesces to what his boss wants, but I'm not sure that it is resulting in the type of policing that I would like to see, given that was my bread and butter at some point, and still I'm very much invested in sound policing practices. I had a personal experience that was very close to me on two occasions that once I launched my own investigation, what I saw was the St. Pete Police Department more invested in supporting officers who had done the wrong thing, as opposed to focusing on the right thing. And while they did not question my investigative techniques, because it was hard to do, what it was clear to me is that we're going to hold our own regardless. And this is what has caused law enforcement problems around this country in many, many years, where public safety has not wanting to police their own. They've not wanted to hold us accountable. And I remember, I'm a graduate of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Executive Institute. And I remember in class one day saying, there's going to come a day that law enforcement is going to have to eat its own words, because what we're doing is we're policing everybody else but ourselves. And that can't, and so I'm just taking notes.
Choir.
Huh?
It's like the choir. What they say? What is that term? The choir preaching or something.
Preaching to the choir.
Preaching to the choir.
Preaching, yeah, that one. There it is.
I would say, probably with the exception of Gary, all of us have had some negative police interactions in the Bay Area over the course of our adulthood.
More tooth came out my mouth. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's concerning to me. I'm a law-abiding citizen. And I have had a real positive relationship with Chief Holloway in my role as NAACP president. But the one thing that I cannot excuse is when you're shown rather clearly that your officers have done something that is inappropriate or just inappropriate. I'll just keep it there. And your stance is to support that officer at all costs. That's not public safety to me.
Yeah.
Well, therein lies the difference between policy and
Moral
policing.
ethics.
I mean, Pinellas County was one of the first to have civil citations for cannabis possession release, and we were grateful for that. Mm-hmm. And yet the question is, are the police following along, or are they following their own path in regards to how the policy has been laid out? Mm-hmm. And who's pushing the police? Is it the GEO group? That's always the thought in our mind. Are they trying to fill the prisons, or are they trying to reduce recidivism and increase rehabilitation and make our streets safe?
Right.
Well, Gary, you also bring up a point about disparities in policing, because even though civil citations are in an officer's toolbox, they have to choose to do that, just like they have to choose to give someone a warning. You know, for example, Carlos talked about his story about, you know, how they had him park his car, they took his tag. But I can guarantee you, had that probably been Katrina, they might have taken her to jail.
Yes,
I've seen it happen in Tampa many times.
That's what
it happened to me. That's why I was like, "Whoa, no warning!" Like, okay,
yeah. That discretion, that line of discretion, has to be a topic of conversation, because when you see it disproportionately used, it's okay. It's no longer discretion. It's something else at that point. And those are the kinds of conversations that I want to have with, you know, whomever would be my chief of police. I know when I was the NAACP president, I had a conversation with Chief Holloway about wanting to be a part of the community that comes in and talks with new recruits, because I know the pressure of a new officer coming in. I know the stigma that can be associated with the perceptions of what they've heard in the street about certain neighborhoods. And I want it to be a different voice for them. I want it to be a voice of, okay, I know the law enforcement side. I've been previously certified in 3 law enforcement academies. I get it. But what I do know is that when it comes to how you interact with everyday people, will determine your success on that role, on the role in patrol. Absolutely. And that when that gun is strapped to people's side, there's a certain elevation of power that people can take on that is totally unnecessary, but it's because of the perceptions. And I wanted to help kind of quell some of those perceptions about what it means when you're patrolling in the Black community. Black people can be some of your best advocates in law enforcement. Sure. They can be your worst enemy. But it's all about how you come into a community and the role that you play once you come into a community.
Indeed. You know, and I had the opportunity to really get at the heart of the diversity and the different neighborhoods in St. Pete when I was organizing the professors at St. Pete College. And I got to see some neighborhoods that were just fantastical, you know, and really pretty. I got to see other neighborhoods where I felt like the city was leaving them behind. And I got to knock on doors in August and September when, you know, the rainy season comes. So there were times where, depending on what neighborhood you were in, you couldn't even drive down the street because the water was flooding so bad.
Yes.
And so what are your thoughts on
Fowler Avenue?
Yeah, well, I've been in Tampa as well. Yeah, Suitcase City. But I was thinking more South St. Pete, in some of the flooding that I saw when I was knocking on doors for professors, and that's the other thing too. Adjunct professors are unique because some of them are working class, white collar workers that are having to piece together 3 and 4 jobs at 3 and 4 colleges, and other ones it's kind of a side gig for their main hustle. And so some live in really nice houses and really nice neighborhoods, and other ones are in neighborhoods, like I said before, it feels like they're being left behind by their government. So my question to you, Marie, is what are your thoughts on city infrastructure? Like where do the dollars need to be spent right now? We've talked a lot about policing. Carlos has talked a little bit about small business revitalization, but what are your thoughts of where the tax dollars should be going? And then, I see that's all kind of shaded over by the idea that the DeSantis administration wants to cut your revenues off by ending property taxes.
And there goes the big question. If you I am a very much a practical public administrator, and I always want to know what is the impact. And because it's not just about dollars and cents, we can throw around we spent this many dollars and this, but my question is, have we resolved the issue? And the answer is no. When we talk about the impact of flooding, nobody has been able to explain to me why we are any of you all familiar with the Bartley Park, Harbordale neighborhood? Did I leave? Can you hear me, guys?
No. By all means, please let's tell us more.
And
we can hear you, we just don't know.
The question for me in that neighborhood, after my and it's very personal, my nephew's grandmother has lived in a house there for 51 years. 2 storms wiped the house out. And all I could think about is the construction that has taken place on 6th Street. And it's up in a matter of months. And then you go to the neighborhoods over off of 26th Avenue and 37th Street. I had a long conversation with a pastor last week about some of the trauma that his family is experiencing as a result of the flooding. We're not hearing the solutions. We're hearing about there's a plan. We're hearing about that there's a lot of money being spent, but the question and the education comes, what is happening to fix the problem? Flooding gates, we've heard about some, I can't think of the name of the gate, floodgate kind of thing that they're talking about for Shore Acres, who definitely has experienced the blunt of this flooding, and this just did not start. That's the thing that is so disturbing about this, is these issues regarding flooding has not just started, it has only gotten worse. And the only environmental factor that people like you and I see is we keep building. So the question, which no one can seem to answer for me, is the significant increase that we have in building compounding the problem with flooding? Or I just want to know if that is a very simple correlation between we have these buildings going up every in all parts of town. We have this flooding now, and we still have the flooding, but we're spending a lot of money on the infrastructure. Is it going to fix the issue? And I don't see anything in the horizon where that is the ultimate aim.
Is it possibly that it's the same issue that they have in Miami right now? Or actually, Miami, the water is coming out of the sewers and is flooding the streets. Because we do have a rise in the water level, at least on the east side of the state. Is the west side of the state probably dealing with the same issue?
Wow. Well, Carlos, if that is the issue, I've definitely not heard that one, and was not aware of that in Miami. But that could certainly be problematic if, in fact, that was something similar that we're experiencing in St. Pete. And like I said, I just don't know at this point.
Well, you're surrounded by
Gary, I know that the mayor in Tampa has wanted to put treated water back into our water supply. We call it the toilet to tap model, and that is concerning in itself. But I bring it up because what happens in Tampa to the environment also happens in the St. Pete. The God didn't develop our planet with artificial borders in mind. And I think that's important to look at is our water tables and how everything affects us regionally. I mean, we saw it in North Florida with how they're fighting over the diversion of the St. Johns River. How Tampa affects the water supply, how St. Pete affects development, how it affects flooding across the whole bay. Maria brought up a point earlier. We need to have a regional focus in our development and how things shake out, because Carlos even said it affects businesses on both sides of the bridge.
Both sides of that's exactly right. Exactly right. And the bigger issue you talked about earlier, what is happening in Tallahassee is, I believe, having a direct impact on local communities. And good Lord Jesus, if we lose home rule, where local communities are no longer able to design and develop their own policies, that is going to take a lot more than a bunch of speeches. We've got to we've got to have a strategy as to how to undo that, because we were you talking about a police state then.
Can I ask, I have a question really quick. Hold it up, Gary, whoever that was. I'm sorry. Really quick, Miss
I can hold it.
Okay, really quick. So when you say you don't see the problems being fixed, or you don't see that's the caliber of the whole issue and what they're trying to do with the monies, give us like one prime example. If it was you had you have the money access, you can make the final decision. This is the way to go. Give us something like the smallest thing that you can come up with, or can be a better infrastructure of why you think what they're doing is not working, if that makes sense.
Okay. Is it regarding infrastructure or just an example of how we're utilizing funds in any capacity and how we can do it better?
No, well, I'm talking about for one, since we were talking about the police situation, and you were like, in the academy, you don't think they're doing it right because you get first dibs. You've seen it, you're not agreeing. What do you think? Why do you not agree? Let me just ask that.
Well, one of the things that I come from a perspective of having gone through 3 police academies. I know what it's like the first time that you strap that gun on. I also know from a law enforcement perspective what some of the conversation is had with new recruits. What I was asking Chief Holloway to do was to allow me to come in because he had various members coming in from the community that talked to new recruits, but he would not allow me to be one of those individuals. And well, let me tell you, I think one of the challenges that leaders have with me in this community is I have a no nonsense truth approach. I operate from a foundation that I'm going to tell the truth, and that I operate from a foundation that I'm looking at results. I'm not trying to elevate Maria Scruggs. I'm trying to impact the lives of people, everyday working hard people that nobody seems to be advocating for. And so when you talk about one of the issues that I really would really like to hit on is this historic gas plant, because that is the biggest development issue that we're going to have facing the next mayor. And there are very key policy issues that are going to be impacted as to, do we push forward a process like this depending on data and information from 2020, or do we put a pause and allow for a planning process that takes into account that we have had a lot of conditions change in our infrastructure. in St. Pete. We've
Yep,
had
losing the stadium was a big one.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So what I would do differently, which is very well documented, I would put a pause on the process. And I had a developer text me and said, "Well, Maria, what do you want to do? You just want everything to stop?" And I'm like, "No, sir, I don't want everything to stop. I want everything to pause. Because what I want to do is this city to do is due diligence in making sure that we have taken into account that our infrastructure is not the same infrastructure that it was 10 years ago, that our economy is not the same that it was 10 years ago." And one of the reasons that we see the middle class uh, uh, um, uh, uh, um, I can't even find the word, while we're losing the middle class in St. Petersburg, it's because nobody's addressing those issues. It's either what you see on the big end is we're talking about affordable housing, for example. Well, how do we translate a person being able to purchase a $310,000 home, whether it's interest or no interest, on a $15, $18 hour job? And
Right.
so, but
Right.
nobody is talking, nobody is having the discussion with industry leaders, because as you know, the federal government sets the minimum wage. But one of the things that local governments have the ability to do is to raise that. Now, would it be suicidal for a mayor to go in and say, "Yes, I want to increase the minimum wage in St. Petersburg, Florida to $25 an hour"? That would be suicide. What you would do is to then
I'm coming. I'm
convene.
moving.
I'm actually working on that right now in Maryland to get the $25 minimum wage. So
Okay. Oh, awesome. 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 And
hopefully Governor Westmore will make that happen.
awesome, awesome, and that's what I want to do. I want to. I had initially, one of the first things I did was what I call have these CEO one-on-one conversations, because a large part of being able to move the needle on any kind of significant impact, to have any kind of significant impact in the community, you've got to have these relationships with businesses that go beyond just the ceremonial photo ops, or when a Fortune 500 company comes in, or as we talk about small businesses, we have to first recognize that our base of our economy in St. Petersburg is the small businesses. And that's where our strength has. But when you try to find out what is the actual strategy, and one of the things I would be doing differently is collaborating with small businesses to say, how do we build a core of economic clusters that support your ability to do business in this city? And then alongside of that, you have to also have conversations with institutional leaders about how do we then increase salaries so that people that live here, that want to live here, can afford to live here and stay here, and that it's not a city that continues to move in the direction of the have and the have nots, because that's exactly what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. If you work for a living, you probably don't want to live in St. Petersburg. It's just that simple. And
It's just that
and
simple.
Now,
Yeah.
what if there's one word that I could have to use to describe St. Petersburg is diversity. I mean, it is a highly, highly diverse community. The Pride Parade in St. Pete is like the jewel of Florida Pride parades, and yet I see a cultural war coming from Tallahassee that is targeting, especially even though you're in a nonpartisan race. St. Petersburg is usually considered a blue city. And blue
yes.
city mayors are under attack right now, unfortunately, by this current administration, which is not the way it's supposed to be.
Right. Let me tell you what the where I think blue cities have made the mistake. It's how they have implemented DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has become like this thing that's on the side, and you hire a diversity person that makes a lot of money, You hire a gay LGBTQ liaison, you hire a black liaison, you hire a Hispanic liaison, and none of it impacts policy. And you have the segregation of events that you loop under this DEI. That's not the way to do it. Because my position is that unless the state of Florida is ready to say that we're no longer going to have Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July celebrations, there is no way in the Sam Hill that we're going to eliminate pride as one of the biggest economic events in this community. That's insane. And so
You can dream on
talk,
it.
huh?
You can dream on it.
You can dream on it, but that's not going to happen because when you talk about cultural, all of those holidays are cultural holidays. Those events and celebrations occur. So I don't believe that is the legislature's intent to get rid of Christmas celebrations, Thanksgiving, and 4th of July. So, and along with that comes the fact that we will continue. We're not going to be getting rid of celebrating the recognition of the Holocaust. The Florida Museum isn't going anywhere. The Pride event isn't going anywhere, and the celebration of LGBTQ communities are not going anywhere. Certainly, the celebrations of Juneteenth, but again, it's how and it's as the old people used to say, it's the devil is in the details. How do you incorporate those things into policy and practice that they happen, and they're not sitting out under a title of something that allows the state government to come and swoop down on and go, oh well, we got you because you did this, you set up a whole DEI. You don't need a DEI office. You don't need a DEI. As I've said many times, and I'm on the record of saying this, the mayor has to be the person who is responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion in their administration. That is not an area that you can delegate to somebody else if it is to happen. And when we have a strong mayor form of government like we do in St. Petersburg, the mayor has to become more strategic in how do you make your city more inclusive, where you're not setting yourself up to be attacked by the state or by the federal government. And I believe I have the opportunity to do that. Guys, I will be the only person that enters this race that comes in as a public administrator. Everybody else are professional politicians. I'm not a professional politician. I don't care about focusing on how much money I have to raise or re-election. I know I need money. I know that. But when that becomes your primary focus of being able to court developers for the sake of getting reelected, that puts a whole different perspective on how you govern. But when you are a public administrator, I have been trained in the state of Florida on how to manage in the public sector. I've had over 40 years of managing various department organizations and crossing various venues and law enforcement, community corrections, public housing, nonprofits. And what that gives you, what that does is set me apart from anybody else that will be in this race. Because anybody else that comes in this race, with the exception of Mr. Conglini or even the former fire chief, is they will not have had that experience of managing people, processes, and systems in the public sector. It's a matter of being strategic as opposed to reactive. And that's what being political gets you. You're reacting to a certain situation. And I go back to the historic gas plant. This is the one opportunity that we will have that will seed somebody's legacy. And we want to pray that it is a legacy that we're able to see the impact, that it won't be a matter about me being reelected, because the people themselves are going to be, oh yeah, I'm able to see how our ability to afford things have changed. Businesses, I'm able to see how my foot traffic has changed, how my business has been helped, and how the city has helped profile our businesses, or how this economic cluster that we've built to support small business, how that's working. People are able to see that, and it speaks for itself. And it's not me, it won't be me, the mayor, having to taunt what I've done. The people will speak for me. And here, ergo, why my campaign theme is about people over politics. That's all I know. I don't know how to be political. I just know how to help improve the quality of life for everyday working people, and that's what my goal is in this race.
Well, Maria, that is a great way to finish off the segment today. Why don't you just tell folks how they can get involved, where they can find out more information about your campaign?
Awesome. Please go to mariafrommayor.com. And our primary work right now is getting our petition signed. We qualify for the ballot either by petition of collecting 1,000 petitions from registered voters in St. Petersburg. So please, if you would go to my website and download a petition and get it back to us. We have a way that you can do that, and also donations. This is about people, and so what we say to you, whatever you can give, whatever you see the value in seeing a city that is truly about the we versus the me, we'd ask if whatever that amount is, if you would please donate to mariafrommayor.com.
Well, we appreciate you joining on, Maria, and we hope to have you back on after the election, and we could talk about how we move forward in that area. So.
Yeah,
awesome, guys.
And we need to talk about the way of reducing that high school to prison pipeline that so much envelops our youth right now.
Awesome. Round 2 with Maria.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, guys. And thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you. See you later, fellas. I gotta get back to work.
All right, bye, Kat. Yep. Well, with all that, team, I think it's time for the news. So at the top of the news, just jumping on right in here and making myself big. All right. I think some interesting things happened this week that folks should be aware of. The Supreme Court actually heard an appeal from the Justice Department on the Fifth Circuit Court appeals decision, the United States versus Himani, which will determine whether or not the Second Amendment ban for cannabis users is unconstitutional. Lower courts have offered similar opinions to overturn the ban. And, you know, it was argued in the grand scheme of things, the federal government has an interest in ensuring that those who habitually consume illicit drugs do not possess firearms because Schedule I substances, including cannabis, have been determined by Congress to be dangerous per se. Therefore, even if one only uses it a couple of times a week, they should be disarmed. That's what the United States government is saying, that if you smoke weed, you do not have a Second Amendment right. Now, several justices appear to be skeptical of the government's position, opining that to the degree which a substance may or may not induce a consumer towards violence is not a specific criterion of the Controlled Substances Act. Justices also question the reliability of the federal government's assessment of cannabis as a Schedule I drug, especially after President Donald Trump's White House recently directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to reclassify it as Schedule III and asked if there's any convincing historical evidence connecting cannabis to violence. Now, NORML was among several advocacy organizations coming out in support of overturning this ban. And, you know, it's a really interesting day when you have organizations that on the ideological political spectrum seem so far apart, but you had NORML and the NRA, the National Rifle Association, both filing amicus briefs in this case, asking the court to strike down the categorical ban. You know, and I just want to quote what our NORML brief said. It said that, quote, for centuries, Americans cultivated, consumed, and prescribed cannabis without any suggestion that doing so warranted the loss of firearms. And state legal medical cannabis users are readily continue to do so today with the protections of Congress. NORML went on further to say that the historical analogs of the government identifies concern temporary restrictions on carrying or firing weapons while intoxicated on persons adjudged dangerous, not blanket bans on all users of a disfavored substance. Our normal board chair and co-author of the brief, Joe Bondi, went on CNN this week and said that cannabis, unlike alcohol, is not typically associated with inducing violent behavior. And he further added that cannabis is consumed responsibly by millions and millions of Americans, and that the federal government's effort to disarm an entire class of people clearly violates the Constitution. Now, it's interesting enough that you saw justices like Justice Gorsuch and Justice Coney Barrett, who are very conservative, aligning with Justice Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson to see that this clearly is wrong and it is unconstitutional. And so we will see how this shakes out. Now, Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Alito definitely had their reservations about it, but if it goes the right way, the way I'm counting the votes right now, you need 5 to win a Supreme Court case. It looks like that may happen if the 2 conservative justices who expressed the government's case of skepticism hold and vote with the liberal justices on the court on this issue. Now, all in all, I think the historical thing to point out is that Thomas Jefferson, when he was governor of Virginia, in the early parts of America, like literally during the war, I believe it was like 1781, towards the conclusion of the war, we needed weapons, we needed guns, and a brand new country printing its money was worthless. And he literally had to sell hemp. He sold pounds of weed to buy weapons for the Continental Army. And somehow this modern U.S. government thinks that cannabis users and people who sell weed should not have guns. And I'm just pointing out that Thomas Jefferson, someone who helped write the Declaration of Independence, who served as vice president, president of these United States, and even governor of Virginia, sold weed to make sure that we have the freedom that we appreciate today. And somehow the Supreme Court is sitting on whether or not you have the freedom to have your constitutionally protected rights infringed upon because of this policy of the Controlled Substances Act and the upholding of it for so many years. This is definitely one of the key constitutional issues of our time. And we're going to say that even though the government says, yes, cannabis users shouldn't have their guns, NORML is going to continue to say no. And we are not silent in this. We're not alone in this. Again, we have the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Rifle Association all on board with us in the grand scheme of this. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But pay attention to the Supreme Court, because there is a lot to be said about your civil rights and how it shakes out in all of this. And furthermore, there's some interesting studies coming out, especially after what we talked about today with our recent guests. And I think these studies help make the case as well. Number one study coming out of observational data that's been published in the International Journal of Research in Public Health is that CBD-dominant cannabis products provide significant anxiety relief. Investigators affiliated with the University of Colorado at Boulder examined daily associations between cannabis use and anxiety across 30 days in 345 adults. The participants used flower or edible products, and they were randomly assigned to different product groups. Some had 24% THC and 1% CBD. Some of them took edibles that had 10 milligrams of THC and no CBD. Others smoked a CBD-dominant flower that was less than 1% THC and 24% CBD, as well as 10 milligrams of CBD with 0 THC in their edibles, or a balanced THC and CBD, a 12% to 12% ratio, that 1-to-1 ratio, and the same with their edibles, 10 milligram THC, 10 milligram CBD. And the participants independently actually purchased their products assigned from a local partner dispensary. The participants in all 3 groups experienced significant decreases in their anxiety during the study, with those in the CBD-dominant edibles showing the most consistent reductions from day 1 to day 30. Prior studies have similarly concluded that the daily use of plant-derived CBD extracts leads to dramatic reductions in anxiety among patients with generalized anxiety disorder. And this study proves within-person naturalistic findings that cannabis use is associated with short-term reductions in anxiety, with CBD products producing the most consistent benefits that the study's authors concluded. I gotta say, Carlos, you seem to be the guy that can help out a lot of these folks with their anxiety issues. Considering that's always been something we were talking about today, how folks were purchasing CBD when you first opened, and now things have slowed down a little bit. What are your thoughts on this study, brother?
I mean, it's reassuring to see studies come out like that, because I do feel, I think even NORML had like an article come out saying that there's like a new form of yellow journalism coming out, a new form of cannabis prohibition, or not prohibition, but like, they're bad mouthing cannabis now. There's articles about psychosis going out. There's articles about scromiting going out. And it's good to see that we're on the the side of the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's not new. I mean, we're talking about the same yellow journalism that the Hearst publications were putting out in the 1920s that eventually led to the Marijuana Tax Act in 1934. It was all about pushing more yellow journalism, telling everybody that anybody who uses this stuff turns into a maniac. And everybody knows if you look at Carlos, who consumes about a pound or so a day. He's not
crazy.
Quite the maniac.
No, I'm crazy.
Well, it's interesting in all of this because we've seen a consolidation of our media, whether it's under the Sinclair Group or whether it's the Ellisons, but we're seeing media dominated by fewer and fewer companies and organizations. Independent media oftentimes has its voice squashed, and then the algorithms on social media, seem to prioritize sensationalism and clickbait rather than actual journalism and truth. And one more article that I want to close on today with the news is that a study came out, published in the journal BMJ Mental Health. And this is investigators affiliated with Yale University and the University of Oxford in England, in the United Kingdom, assessing the cognitive performance in lifetime cannabis consumers and non-users across various domains, including memory, intelligence, and problem solving. And what the study found is that a lifetime of cannabis use is not associated with cognitive decline or dementia risk in older adults. Now, we can go through all the studies, but I can just point to one clear thing. Our founder, Keith Strauch, is in his 80s and still serves as our chief general counsel and still kicks ass each and every day. So I would say that a lifetime of cannabis use is not something that's going to fry your brain. It is not something that we have seen with the propaganda that came out of the Reagan years, in the propaganda that came out of the Nixon years, nor the propaganda that we see in the modern era with the scromiting and the popcorn lungs and the vaping. There is so much to be said about cannabis use. What the issues we have today with cannabis is safety and efficacy. Is whether or not the quality of the products you're consuming is going to make a difference. And since we've industrialized it, that has been a major concern, which is why we continue to advocate for truth in labeling, that you should know whether or not the dispensary that's cultivating your cannabis, when they're growing it, especially in these vertically integrated systems where it's a seed to sale type of thing, that they're taking shortcuts, that they're spraying mold killer and pesticides on a medicine that you're going to smoke one day, and whether or not they're flushing it in the growth cycle, or whether or not they're properly curing it. Gary has a big issue with the fact that they're selling bud that was cultivated over 9 months ago and sitting on a shelf, and whether or not that's actually going to cause issues for you. So there's a lot to be said about taking care as a consumer of protecting your body, protecting yourself, knowing where you consume and where you buy it at. So if you're going to buy hemp products, maybe not buying them from a gas station with shady practices is the right move. Go buy them from quality folks, like the folks at CS2G, like Chilla, like the folks like Cushy Pies, like the folks that we've seen, the small businesses in the Bay Area that have made all the difference in building trust with their consumers and building trust with their clients to make sure that they're putting out quality products. Maybe not the fly-by-night pop-up store that came up down the street. And I think that's important because in the grand scheme of things, how the medicine is procured, how it's produced matters. And you as a consumer It's always on you. Let the buyer beware, as the old adage. And that's something that still applies to this day, especially in the modern cannabis, whether you're buying hemp products or whether you're buying stuff at a medical dispensary here in the state of Florida. And with all that, team, that's the normal news.
Now, I should mention that I'm all for the hemp industry and things of that sort, but a lot of folks got to remember that this is the same industry, segments of that industry that were selling spice back in the day. So how do you get past trusting that kind of institution with something you're using as medicine, when in fact they were more than willing to sell you things that could be dangerous just because of the fact that they could at that point in time, and paying less attention to who their customers were, and less interested in what they were actually selling them.
Well, you know, Gary, there was an interesting thing. I saw a social media video before we started today's episode, and it was a guy saying, you know, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would not vote for legalization, because they literally legalized me out of a job. They used to sell crime. And now they don't do that anymore. But you know, there is something to ask: was the early 2000s? I recall the 2000s. I mean, there was Willie Nelson, there was Super Silver Haze, there was Green Crack. There were some amazing cultivars that were produced by folks that took a lot of care of how they produced it. And since we've seen the legal industry here in Florida, we've heard reports, we've heard it from employees, that the corporations that are selling stuff in our MMTCs don't always care about the end product, because they definitely don't care about the workers and people producing it. And we've seen the difference in quality, and there's a reason why the legacy market is still hanging around. The legal industry has not been able to kill the legacy market because they can't produce better products than a lot of these folks who take the time and care to make the boutique cultivars that people appreciate so much. And so, you know, the biggest issue that continues to affect whether or not consumers are getting quality product is how many folks are in a market. Do the natural market forces of capitalism actually have a chance? Because what we've seen in America, in at least half of our legal states, is not capitalism. It is a fixed economy. License caps are the biggest hindrance to producing quality product in America. As long as your state caps the amount of people that can get into an industry, and you essentially have to buy a couple of senators to get favorable treatment in the lottery licensing process, I mean, there's no hope for small business owners like Carlos to actually get in and make an impact and do what he loves, and making people happy and providing them quality product. Instead, you have people with shareholders looking to squeeze every ounce on the margins, and it's not making it better for the vast majority of us.
Now, last week I did kind of get down on Jungle Boys because of the fact that they I picked up some pre-rolls and they put down that I had ACE on my recommendation, so I actually lost about a quarter ounce there for the month. Not that that's going to kill me, but the point is, this week I'm going to point out cookies, because I went to cookies for the first time, and there was no actual harvest date on the product. Ooh. And I asked the people behind the counter, and they had no answer for me. So
these are interesting things that need to be addressed. And you know what? In all of it, the Florida legislature this year has had the opportunity to address them. We've had several bills that you and I have both worked on that we've ran through it, and there's only one bill that has any hope in hell of getting out there this session. It is the bill that will reduce fees for medical cards for veterans. And if folks want to take a look at that, you can visit NORML's Action Center. You can click on it and send an email to your legislators. I think it's important that we do this. The House has got it through. Now it's on to the Senate. The Senate version seems to be stalled. There is another bill that is similar to it that could move in the Senate. And Gary, you've had a key issue in regards to it, is that we need to add opioids as a qualifying condition, opioid addiction as a qualifying condition for medical cannabis in Florida. Regardless if the governor wants it or not, it needs to happen, because this is a major issue. We've seen cannabis be an exit drug for people with opioid addiction, and the politicians are not listening and they're not paying attention.
Yeah, the whole point of just pushing out more Narcan and more Narcan and more Narcan is just to get people through their overdose, just so they can overdose again tomorrow. Because of the fact that you're not actually getting rid of the root reason why there was an overdose in the first place.
Yes.
And all the things they've been doing so far to reduce opioid addiction really hasn't carved out a nick out of this opioid addiction that's been sweeping our country for so many years since since all the Oxycontins, everything else has gone on. And so we really need to go back to our roots, where cannabis has been used as a opioid dependence remediator since the 1880s. I mean, it's not new, but it's at this point in time forbidden, and that needs to be changed, because that's another one of those areas, like even treatment of sickle cell anemia, which cannabis can be used for, not a qualifying condition kind of situation, that can be fixed. And to that end, there is a presser and a group of people, veterans that I was invited to join on Tuesday over in Tallahassee, and we'll be there in front of the cameras and pushing again to get this bill to go through, hopefully amended, so that we can get this thing done. And I would highly suggest, if you want to come over to Tallahassee on Tuesday and join us and support the veterans, I would suggest you be there.
Yeah, I mean, as folks can see on the screen, we put it in the comments, so you can click the link and send an email to your legislators now, demanding that they take this up and that they address it. As our friends at the bunker say, we need all hands on deck. Our veterans definitely need to see this reduction, and we need to ensure that the mental health of our veteran community is protected. It's crazy to think that any person has to spend $75 a year on a medical card in the state of Florida, and then another, $150 to $300 for a doctor recommendation. And then even then, Gary, you're saying that we have MMTCs that don't have labels on the products properly, that they're even nickel and diming you and cheating you out of your allowances, depending on how they register things in the system. This is not a patient-centric experience that is meant to help sick people under the current system, and the lawmakers need to do better. And so it can't just be 3 angry guys every Sunday here screaming into social media that's going to get it done. It's got to be you, the people, joining us, stepping it up, and letting the million-plus patients' voices actually be heard for these politicians who have one goal in mind, and that's to get reelected. And they need to understand that although there are powers that be that write big campaign checks, money doesn't vote. We, the people, vote. And we need you to get out there and remind them of that. And you can support what we're doing by liking, subscribing, commenting today on this show, and each and every Sunday. Follow.
Oh, sorry. That's the wrong thing completely. There we go.
Follow us on social media. Follow us on social media, whether that's on YouTube right now or Twitch, Facebook. Maybe you're watching us on Instagram. Maybe you're watching us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it these days. But look, the grand scheme of it all is we need your support. We need you to become a member. You can become a member of Suncoast NORML and really get into this fight with us. You can become a member of National NORML and ensuring that we're developing new chapters, that we're engaging in Congress, that we're working to make sure that we can legalize it for each and every one of you. I mean, 9 decades of lies is enough. It is time that we put an end to it and we accomplish the mission, and that is to legalize it. And we're not just a bunch of people screaming at the top of our lungs about politics. We also believe in culture, and we believe that there's some amazing cultural events that we as a chapter can put on and do for you. And the key one has always been in April each and every year, and that is the Best Blunt of the Bay. And this is the 5th rendition, Best Blunt of the Bay 5. It's our annual rolling competition. And this year, we're adding a dabathon sponsored by Chillum. We're going to have a rolling and dabbing competition Saturday, April 18th. Tickets are already selling. We've already sold some judge tickets. Judges have the best time because they get to smoke the entries. Rollers are going to go home with some amazing prizes like they do each and every year. So if you think you can roll the best blunt in the Bay, it's going to be at Chillum in St. Petersburg on April the 18th, Saturday evening. Make sure you come out, enter the competition now. Go to suncoastnormal.org, sign up, get your judge pass. If you just want to watch, if you don't want to roll, if you don't want to smoke, you just want to enjoy, have a good time, commiserate with some like-minded folks, come on out. We got general admission tickets available. If you're a Suncoast NORML member, like I said, you can join Suncoast NORML. You get free general admission. So all of our members that have up to date on their dues, you just come on in. We'll check you off the list, and you have a great time at Chillum St. Pete on the 18th.
Absolutely. And the more the merrier. That's what it comes. That's the way it comes down to in Tallahassee. The more faces they see, the more stories they hear, the more they have to react. Because right now they're going their own path right now, and it's not always the best thing because they're not thinking the way we're thinking. That's the case, and that's why, in a representative form of government, we need them to represent us by knowing exactly what we're thinking and what we're feeling.
Well, Gary, I think that's a good segue into our guest that we're supposed to have coming up. Is Fentress Driscoll, who is our House Minority Leader, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, I'm pretty excited to have her on the show. Hopefully, there's not another crisis that we have to move into a future episode like we've had to do a couple times this year. But we know that there's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in Tallahassee, and we appreciate all the hard work that our elected officials, who are champions of patients and of the people, are doing up there in the Capitol.
And we have more guests coming up. We have more congressional candidates who are stepping up, and who want us to hear what they have to say, how they are going to change things both in the state and in the federal government. And that's why we bring you this content, so you could be appraised of what's going on. And we need your help to keep it going.
And
That's
we try to mix it up. It's not always politicians. We try to bring in dispensary owners, folks who are small business owners. We work to bring in cannabis celebrities, and we got some of those coming up on the horizon. So again, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching us on social media, and so you can stay up to date on the latest. And of course, our regular time each and every Sunday at 11 a.m. Jump in the rotation with Suncoast NORML. And Carlos, as always, you have the last word, brother.
Smoke weed every day.